In this pod slice summary of the Club Random podcast, guest Candace Owens and host Bill Maher explore various topics ranging from family planning, environmental concerns, and even conspiracy theories. One of the first topics they broached is Owens' decision to continuously remain pregnant. With a 2-year-old, a 1-year-old, and another one due in November, Owens has been in a state of pregnancy for 3 consecutive years. She highlights that not all women experience pregnancy as a challenge and that for her it isn't really a big deal. Her reasoning for having her children so close together was a desire not to restart the process after a gap. When the conversation turns to environmental concerns, Owens shares her perspective on population growth, arguing that we are not running out of space and that the idea of more people equating to more resource usage is absurd. Maher, on the other hand, differs by expressing concern regarding the depletion of resources, especially groundwater. Owens and Maher also dive into a discussion about climate change, where Maher criticizes the environmentalists for spreading alarmist theories. While Owens agrees that the climate is always changing, she accuses the environmentalists of creating a climate hoax that is costing trillions of dollars. The podcast takes a surprising turn when Maher brings up a tweet from Owens that suggested doubt about the moon landing. Owens defends her comment, saying it was part of a thread about fun conspiracy theories. She insists that this topic is not relevant to the broader conversation about climate change and accuses Maher of deflecting from the main discussion. In between these discussions, the two also delve into broader societal issues. For instance, they discuss the prevalence of large Catholic families, a point brought up because of Owens' husband's strong Catholic beliefs. Owens seems to embrace the idea of potentially having a large family herself. The discussion then veers into Owens' gardening hobby, with her being impressed by a large zucchini Maher has grown. The podcast ends without clear resolution, but provides the audience with an intriguing look at a wide range of topics from a unique perspective. As the conversation between Owens and Maher continues, they delve into various subject areas that touch on societal norms, parental rights, and controversial topics like gender identification and vaccinations. Firstly, the topic of gender identification in children sparks a vibrant discussion. Owens expresses disapproval on how states like LA and New York have become hubs where the state goes too far in deciding children's gender identity issue. She says that parents' rights are being violated when their views or wishes are not considered in such a profound decision affecting their children. Maher aligns with Owens' viewpoint, indicating he too wouldn't be able to keep silent on matters concerning his hypothetical kids' schooling. This conversation leads them to the contentious matter of vaccinations. Owens states she produces a separate series discussing vaccines and believes that parents should have the freedom to decide whether their children should receive them. Maher chimes in and agrees, stating vaccines are a tool in the medical kit, but it shouldn't be forced. Owens uses this to highlight the increased number of vaccines children receive today compared to when she was a kid, citing it as a concern given the high infant mortality rates. As the discussion emerges around the rules and norms surrounding children's behavior, Owens expresses her dismay at the trend among LA parents to treat children as equals rather than subordinates. Owens shares an instance where a parent said they didn't believe in telling their child no, which she views as problematic as it fails to provide necessary boundaries. Maher concurs, comparing the U.S. to a medieval European country where everyone must take seriously the whims of a toddler king. Lastly, they converse about Owens' life in Nashville and compare it to L.A., with Owens appreciating Nashville's different environment. She appreciates the more conventional parenting norms in the rural city and understands why people relocate to places like Austin and Nashville, away from L.A.'s liberal cultures. They also briefly discuss trans issues, reflecting on Maher's earlier segment about the regional manner of trans occurrences, which Owens finds compelling. All these discussions reflect the diverse range of topics explored in the podcast: education, gender identification, vaccinations, and societal norms, making for a complex, multifaceted conversation between Owens and Maher. In this portion of the Club Random podcast, Maher and Owens continue to probe various topics, starting with Owens expressing disbelief in the non-binary category for gender identification. She hints at it seeming like a generational expression rather than a universal reality, contemplating why it seemed non-existent during her school days. Amid their chat, they take time out to thank podcast sponsors. They mention companies such as Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, and ZipRecruiter, a tool that makes the hiring process easier and faster. With these sponsor segments, Maher and Owens subtly promote the idea that busy individuals can still maintain a healthy lifestyle and effectively manage their businesses with the right support. The conversation veers back to societal matters, with Maher noting that both he and Owens trigger agreement and disagreement in their respective audiences, proving their bold and distinct viewpoints on various topics. They discuss Eminem's political stance, which Owens criticizes, focusing on his overt disapproval of Trump. Maher agrees, hinting that Eminem doesn't appeal to him in the same way anymore. Further, the duo discusses the dynamics among political leaders, particularly possible candidates for vice presidency. They mention names like Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, and Ron DeSantis as potential candidates while discussing their motivations and evident shifts in political alliances. Owens and Maher don't always agree on this, each putting forward unique perspectives based on their political savvy. They then look at names regularly mispronounced by political figures, pointing out when this mispronunciation seems calculated to underline a distinction between us and them. Maher wraps up the section by analyzing why the likes of Mike Pence might run for president. He states that Pence sees it as God's plan, hinting at the intertwining of religion and politics. Owens counters, stating that Pence might feel his brand was tarnished by an alliance with Trump and could be seeking a chance to redeem himself. In essence, the exchange between Maher and Owens touches on the intersection of societal, political, and personal issues shaping the discourse in American society. Their conversation prompts reflection on the evolution of societal norms, political alliances, and the interplay of personal belief systems. In this engaging dialogue, Maher and Owens examine various discerning topics, including the contentious Capitol storming debate. Dissecting the political climate, Maher asserts that the alarming event was a part of a larger detrimental issue. The problem, he said, was former President Trump's refusal to accept the election results, even after evidence assertion from his administration and other authorities. Owens, however, insists that the story is incomplete and points out other mysterious events, such as undigested pipe bombs, hinting at a potential media bias. The conversation shifts to the influence of media hoaxes. Both Maher and Owens agree that media's excessive focus on Trump during his presidency had diverted attention away from other pressing issues. Comparing this obsession to an attempt to take him down, Owens reiterates her earlier point about media bias, but also acknowledges Trump's polarizing rhetoric, including the infamous "grab them" comment. The host and guest take time to address a rather concerning development: the generational shift towards online platforms like OnlyFans, where individuals commodify their bodies. Maher suggests this trend is a symptom of men feeling lost and disoriented. Owens agrees, arguing that men are indeed struggling. They both place the problem within the wider context of a societal shift in the gender dynamics. Topics of feminism and gender roles come to the fore, with Owens arguing that rabid feminism and the Me Too movement have been detrimental to relations between men and women. She implies that society can recognize that many men may behave inappropriately, but women behaving the same way are often overlooked. Owens forcefully suggests permitting both perspectives, acceptance that some men may behave like dogs, while some women could be perceived as groupies. In an unexpectedly insightful turn, the duo considers the rising concerns regarding men's mental health. Maher points to the steadily improving women's status, evident via their increased educational attainment and reduced suicide rates compared to men, and acknowledges the hazardous consequences of an increasingly distressed male population. This not only honors the challenges that men face in today's times, but also underscores the necessity of addressing men's issues with the same urgency we approach women's problems. Merely halfway through this robust exchange, Maher and Owens have covered an array of subjects from media bias, societal norms, gender politics, to mental health concerns, providing a varied feast of content to devour. In this thought-provoking discussion, Maher and Owens delve into the impacts and the pervasiveness of pornography. They express concerns about the increasing accessibility and normalization, arguing that it's shaping people's perspective of sex and relationships in a deviant and unhealthy way. Maher shares his experiences with porn's evolution, while Owens asserts its detrimental effects on men, making them weaker due to a lack of self-control and impulse regulation. The interaction also uncovers men's struggles with porn addiction, a subject many avoid discussing openly. Turning to the topic of relationships, Maher reveals his views about monogamy and admits that his fascination with sex and pornography may have deterred him from marriage. The dialogue brings up a potent challenge about whether one person can remain engaging enough to maintain a lifetime's interest. Yet Owens counters this notion with an example of her deep affection and respect for her grandfather, someone she claims was that interesting. The conversation then winds towards political inclinations, focusing particularly on racism. Owens shares a fond memory of speaking in front of Congress about white supremacy, wherein she quoted her grandfather's experiences with actual racism. She passionately criticizes the manipulation of these historical sufferings for mere social media attention, something she deems an insult to those who've lived through real racism. She also mourns the perceived weakening of black people, who she believes have historically turned their pain into strength and humor. The dialogue goes full circle as Maher and Owens come back to the topic of freedom of speech and humor. They lament the current social climate that hampers open jesting and leads to sewn eggshells, arguing that genuine proximity is achieved when everyone is free to humor each other across racial and cultural lines. The duo concurs that such freedom does not negate the existence of actual racism, but allows society to grow closer through shared amusement and mutual respect. This rich conversation presents listeners with an immense range of subjects to ponder and discuss. In the continuation of their dynamic discourse, Maher and Owens tackle a variety of subjects, displaying the breadth of their intellectual curiosity. The conversation shifts from talking about a chilling docuseries Owens is working on to how she perceives racism. The duo discusses the lack of sophistication often seen in racists and how Owens refuses to lower her standards by being offended by such people. This stimulates a dialogue about how the culture of racism has evolved over time and how the diminishing presence of real racists has often been conflated with ordinary interpersonal conflicts. Maher and Owens frown upon self-flagellating white guilt and find the espousal of such notions in public to be cringeworthy. They agree that these apologies, while seemingly well-intentioned, often come across as disingenuous and patronizing. Owens points out the imposed expectation for black people to forgive such individuals, which she feels places an unfair burden on the black community. Furthermore, Maher and Owens share their perspectives on media and its influence. They denounce how situations involving individuals of different races are often racialized, obscuring the fact that conflict can arise from mere human nature. They find the trend of instantaneously turning conflicts or disagreements into a racial issue unpleasant and misleading. Maher believes this does a disservice to societal coexistence and widens racial divide. The duo also finds common ground in their admiration for humor. Maher and Owens recall how comedians of the past were able to cross cultural and racial lines to provide laughter. This led to the sharing of sentiments on how race-related jokes that were acceptable in the past might not be well received given the recent shift in the cultural landscape. While they acknowledge that society has a long way to go concerning race and discourse, they remain hopeful. They believe that conversations such as the one they are having can initiate change and facilitate discussions that lead to a more nuanced understanding of these complex issues. The conversation between Maher and Owens continues, diving into a comical but insightful observation by Owens, who articulates that people from the redneck culture and individuals from the urban hood are essentially the same, contrary to the divisive narrative often portrayed by the media. They divulge into the parallels and shared practices between these two misunderstood segments of society, and Owens pinpoints media's role in maintaining the imagined barrier and preventing potential unity. In a shift of topics, Owens and Maher discuss the unfortunate incident involving Rudy Gobert, a French basketball player, making light of the situation amid the emergence of the COVID outbreak. They then move to talking about the perception of racism in the predominantly white state of Utah, a subject brought to light in a New York Times interview with Gobert. Both Owens and Maher echo an ideology of authenticity, decrying the tendency to force narratives that don't organically exist. Moreover, their conversation delves into the transforming media landscape as they discuss an article Vanity Fair published about Owens. The verbose duo criticizes the condescension and imposed narrative of the piece, highlighting the importance of respecting divergent perspectives and beliefs. Discussing the political inclinations of black Americans, they refute the notion that the black community is predominantly liberal. Owens argues that a considerable portion of this community is either moderate or conservative, suggesting the assumption of a homogeneous political belief among black people is deceptive. Turning to the impact of parenthood on Owens, she admits that becoming a mother has sharpened her focus on cultural and societal issues. Her admiration for RFK Jr., despite political differences, underlines her stance, where rationality and pragmatic thought should transcend tribal affiliations. They discuss vaccination and health-related decisions, acknowledging the need for a balanced perspective and due diligence while selecting health interventions. Their shared intrigue in Andrew Sullivan surfaces in their conversation, resonating on how a person can appreciate and gain insight from differing viewpoints. They also express their admiration for individuals like Morgan Freeman and Denzel Washington, who they perceive as stemming from a line of old-school liberals come conservatives and whose thoughts on race are very similar to their own views. In all, through their dialogue, Maher and Owens illustrate their advocacy for open-mindedness, the absence of forced narratives, and respect for differing perspectives. Drawing insights from various sources, including those with differing viewpoints, and continuing to encourage nuanced, comprehensive conversations about cultural and societal issues. In their humorous but enlightening dialogue, Maher and Owens delve further into the contrasting worlds of politics and culture. Owens reveals her purposeful shift away from politics and more towards cultural issues, which she feels impact society more tangibly. Despite the public's desire for her to endorse specific political candidates, she remains steadfast in her resolve to explore interesting facets of each one instead. In a surprising twist, she discusses inviting a Trump supporter onto her platform for an intellectual debate with an opponent, a concept that intrigued her audience. To her, this exchange of varied perspectives enhances the overall discourse and represents a crucial element of culture. Further instigating the discussion, Owens talks about her admiration for RFK Jr. despite facing backlash and name-calling due to the disagreement from many others on certain issues. Adding to this, she highlights the prevalence of conspiracy theories within the right, going as far as using George Soros as an example. She sarcastically points out that not every person can be controlled by Soros, yet some dig far enough just to find a forced connection of 6 degrees of separation. Owens humorously shares an anecdote of herself getting tinged as a pawn of the Illuminati due to a particular sitting pose she had in a picture. Instead of reacting emotionally, she retains her signature wit, entertaining the idea of an invite from the Illuminati due to aggravation from naysayers. The pair also discusses the universal human urge for laughter and its significance, the therapeutic value of a hearty laugh being a point of mutual agreement. Never missing a cue for humor, they banter about Owens's pregnancy with her 3rd child, teasing how it's getting increasingly challenging for her to get up from her seat. Despite the physical discomfort of pregnancy, the underlying anticipation of a new addition to the family is evident in her demeanor. Through it all, Owens maintains her optimism and dedication to fostering open dialogue, proving that she's more than ready to fearlessly grapple with cultural and societal issues, even as she prepares for her growing family. This segment from the Club Random podcast serves to salute her tenacity and the enlightening conversation that emerged from it. Check out the full podcast by clicking the link in the description below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for listening to this podcast summary episode of The Pod Slice.